In case you've been living under a rock for the last month, the Indiana Hoosiers, yeah, those guys, somehow found a way to win a national championship. And their charismatic, pocket-passing field general at quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, not only won the championship, but took home a Heisman Trophy in the meantime. And as a result, he all but cemented his path to becoming a member of the Las Vegas Raiders and the future #1 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. This story has been incredible. They damn well may have changed college football forever, but with it comes an immense amount of hype. And as NFL fans know, hype and expectations are a package deal. Over the last week, I've been grinding the tape on Fernando Mendoza. And in today's video, I'm going to dive into my thoughts on him as a prospect. What are his strengths and weaknesses? And what do I think his chances are of living up to the expectations of a #1 overall pick? As we do get started, if you enjoyed today's video, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that like button down below, it really does help me out, pushes this video out to other NFL and NFL draft fans just like you. And of course, make sure you subscribe. We're going to have lots of draft content heading at you with prospect rankings, mock drafts, you name it. So for the first order of business on Mendoza, you kind of need to recalibrate your eyes a little bit because he is a bit of a dying breed, at least as far as #1 draft picks go. We've gotten so used to the QBs at the top of these drafts being these athletic playmaker types that it's unique to see a guy in Mendoza who plays like he knows that he needs to carve teams up from the pocket to have success. In fact, this draft marks 10 years from the last time we saw more of a pocket passer go #1 with Jared Goff, who went to the Rams in 2016. But Mendoza's tape is a bit of a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of the prospects we've seen in recent years, whether it's Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, or so many others. To see a guy in Mendoza who so consistently prioritizes hitting the top of his drop, getting the ball out quickly, and making accurate in rhythm throws, it's just refreshing to see a college QB play like this. And Mendoza's got the same thing going for him that, say, Dak Prescott or maybe the best versions of Tua Tagovailoa and even Tom Brady had, where he's able to push the ball downfield but early in the play. He can hit the top of his drop, rely on that pre-snap processing, lean into his arm talent and anticipation to give his guy a chance further down the field, while also easing the load on his offensive linemen, getting that ball out a little quicker and not forcing them to have to buy 3+ seconds of protection. And this is a really valuable trait that sadly not enough young quarterbacks have. Out of 108 eligible quarterbacks in college football last year, Mendoza ranked in the top 30th percentile in average time to throw with a 2.67 mark. But he was also in the top 20th percentile in average depth of target, or ADOT, at 9.8 yards, a really good mark. For comparison's sake, Tom Brady in his final Super Bowl year in 2020, he had an identical average depth of target and was similarly low in terms of time to throw at 2.41 seconds, which was insane, but that same healthy combination of balls out quickly, but the ball's also going down the field. Dak Prescott as well also sits in familiar territory. As we said, Mendoza in his final year averaged 2.67 seconds to throw. Dak over the last 5 years has an identical time to throw at 2.68 seconds and a still very good average depth of target at about 8.5 yards, which consistently sits him around the top 10 for NFL passers. I wanted to start with these comparisons because I think it's high praise, and I think highlighting this ability to push the ball downfield without holding on to the ball too long really highlights the very best of what Fernando Mendoza brings to the table. He enters the league with zero doubt that he can play on time and execute rhythm NFL throws deep and outside the numbers. And he's got the arm talent to back it up as well. I've got him graded out with about an A- type of arm, and it really is a thing of beauty when he just plants that back foot and rips a deep out with anticipation, leaving it right in the receiver's breadbasket as he turns around for the catch. And he's also got some of the best instincts to complete back shoulder fades that I've ever seen from a college prospect. And it would be hard for anyone who watched him live not to pick up on that. A huge amount of his best moments came on critical down and distances or in tight quarters down in the red zone. And Mendoza is able to just pin it on his guy's back shoulder with perfect chemistry away from the DB where only his receiver has a chance to make that big catch. So whether he lands in Las Vegas or somehow somewhere else, his team and his coaching staff will almost assuredly make these back shoulder throws a big part of their passing arsenal. But it is worth noting that these types of connections on back shoulders takes two to tango. And if this is going to be such a big part of Mendoza's game in the league, well, this is kind of the beginning of an argument in this video that Mendoza is a quarterback prospect whose success will be more contingent on having the right surrounding cast around him than the average top rookie quarterback prospect. If he isn't surrounded with complementary pass catchers who have the instincts and ball skills to convert on these back shoulder looks, but Mendoza keeps trying them at a high rate anyway, well, things could, get a bit ugly. And this draws me right back to him having some similarities to Dak Prescott in his game. Dak is a QB who's definitely valued these back shoulder throws, and we've seen the drastic differences in his play when he's had his back shoulder glue guy like Dez Bryant or prime Michael Gallup, who was really good for a few years, and now George Pickens, as opposed to the drop-offs we've seen in Dak's play when the Cowboys haven't provided him that complementary receiver to work with. So unless the plan is to draft Mendoza and then take the very best thing he does out of your playbook, it's going to be paramount that the Raiders or whoever drafts him puts the right receivers around him as well who can convert on these nice back shoulder looks. Now, beyond these pretty looking throws down the field and outside the numbers, Mendoza can also read out and attack the rest of the field. But I will admit, given his profile and knowing the heavy praise I'm sure he's going to receive for his processing and accuracy, I was a tick underwhelmed by him in this department. Again, beyond those deep outs and back shoulder fades where he is spectacular. The accuracy especially, I just had a preconceived notion going in that he would be extraordinarily accurate. And that just isn't what I saw on film. A little too often you'll see him, for example, leaving the ball behind his guys on in-breaking routes. So crossing routes, slants, digs. His accuracy over the middle of the field and knowing how much to lead his guy running horizontally is an area I just need to see him improve on, because when he underthrows these balls, not only does he limit run after catch opportunities for his receivers, forcing them to slow down and work backwards for the ball instead of catching them in stride and keeping pace, but we also saw this lead to incompletions or worse at times, interceptions, inviting trailing defenders back into the picture on some of these in-breaking routes. So I would say it was those types of throws where his accuracy underwhelmed me the most. But even on some of those throws we praised earlier, the back shoulders and the deep outs, I wanted to see him even more consistent with his ball placement on those throws, especially on those back shoulders that he throws so often. Considering this is literally his bread and butter, his most defining trait is throwing that back shoulder fade, I was surprised that maybe 1 out of 5 of these throws, he'd leave that ball a little bit too far inside in a spot where the DB has a better chance to make a play on the ball. When he's on, it's a thing of beauty, but I want to see him be on even more often. He's also a guy whose accuracy seems to fall off a cliff when he's got to throw off platform. So whether that's throwing on the run, on a bootleg, or in scramble drill, or when his mechanics get rushed from inside the pocket, the ball can just get away from him at times. This isn't a huge part of his game because he is a guy that's going to try and win largely from the pocket and with his feet planted, but it does just limit the types of throws he'll be able to make when the structure of the play isn't there. And some of these misfires on the run or off his back foot can also end up putting the ball in harm's way. And then beyond the off-platform stuff, you'll also just see him underthrow vertical throws like fades and posts or overthrow them. And look, most QBs will miss throws like this now and again, but when you're already talking about a guy who doesn't offer as much out of structure and a guy that's gonna be the number 1 overall pick, every time he misses one of these deeper throws down the field, you kind of just go, yeah, I want to see you hit that, Mendoza. Just a quick plug here, guys. If you enjoy my draft content, I want to let you know over on my Patreon, you can get access to my full draft guide that has my full write-ups with all my strengths and weaknesses, rankings, you name it, on every prospect that I've watched for the NFL draft. I also have 3 film breakdowns on Mendoza there on Patreon. So if you enjoy my draft content and you want even more of it and you want to support my channel in a big way, you can head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. For those familiar with my Studs and Duds series as well, I did make the move of that series to exclusive content there on Patreon. You can also get access to that through YouTube memberships. Another way to support my channel there. So if you're looking for Studs and Duds, that's where to find it. And let's get back to the video. Now, I also mentioned I was expecting to have a higher grade on his overall processing, given the praise I think he's going to receive for in that department. Now, I want to be crystal clear here. I think he has a good mind for the game and is well above average as a processor for a college prospect. And I think those throws we praised earlier really showcase his confidence in reading coverages, the ability to make decisions quickly. And it's also very rare that we see him make bad decisions with the ball and put the ball in harm's way. He had just 12 turnover-worthy plays, according to PFF, in 16 games in his final season at Indiana, and only a handful of them were actually bad decisions, as opposed to the rest of them where they're either coming on fumbles inside the pocket as a scrambler or inaccurate passes sailing on him and into harm's way. And he only has thrown 6 interceptions in each of his last 2 seasons. And having played effectively an entire NFL season last year at Indiana, as we know, 6 interceptions is a very low mark. So I like his processing ability, but I had really high expectations for what I was going to see. And what underwhelmed me about Mendoza's overall processing ability boiled down to 2 areas. Number 1, attacking the middle of the field. I was surprised, number 1, how few times he attacked the middle of the field on tape, and also how often he actually passed up open receivers over the middle of the field. And then number 2, I thought I'd see a lot more examples of him surveying the field and making those nice full field NFL pro read level progressions. Now, the good thing is you can find examples of him doing both of these things. So you know it's in there. It's just more of a question of whether he can do them more consistently when asked to do them more in the NFL. So with that first point, attacking the middle of the field, this is essentially a non-negotiable with modern offenses in today's NFL. And you just aren't going to get the best version of Fernando Mendoza as a pocket-oriented passer in the league if he doesn't develop more trust and willingness to attack the middle of the field. And I think part of this is on him. I see examples on tape of him passing up open reads over the middle of the field or not throwing with the type of anticipation you'd like to see in this area. And then I think a big part of it too is just the classic, what can you do versus what were you asked to do? Without sugarcoating it, Indiana's offense was pretty elementary. It was largely a heavy dose of RPOs, back shoulder fades, and working one-on-ones towards the sideline on out routes and hitches. They would sprinkle in some common NFL concepts that do attack the middle of the field, but Mendoza was just inconsistent at executing on them. And I just don't see a quarterback who's quite yet particularly comfortable at layering balls over linebackers into the second level, at throwing into zone windows with anticipation, or trusting some of those completions to be there against man coverage before the receiver begins his break. And again, it's not that you can't find any of these throws on his tape. Only I left the Fernando Mendoza tape watching experience wanting to see those throws over the middle of the field more often, and also seeing plenty of opportunities that he had to show those throws more often, and he passed them up and elected to either take a check down or sometimes rolled out of a clean pocket and just kind of left some of that meat on the bones of some of those dropbacks. And then as far as my second point with him and his processing, about wanting to see him go through those full field progressions more often, that's always going to be a big part of being an NFL quarterback, obviously. And once again here, I think he can handle it, but this area especially is just, I really think, what can he do versus what was he asked to do at Indiana. There just aren't a lot of times where Mendoza had to come off his first read because they either schemed things up so well or because they had such a heavy focus on these back shoulder throws that as long as he checked the safety and saw one-on-one, Mendoza had the green light to attempt these back shoulder throws before even thinking about other options that may have been higher percentage looks. I do think it is worth noting, though, that especially earlier in his final season there, I was starting to get pretty frustrated by how often he would really make that first read and then run and bail out of clean pockets, leaving so much meat on the bones in the passing game. Now, fortunately, I saw this a lot less down the stretch. I think he got much better at hanging in the pocket, showcasing that pocket feel through the playoffs, which was really encouraging to see, and I don't feel as strongly that it's a potential weakness for him in the NFL. But I can all but guarantee that Fernando Mendoza, for what he is, will not make it in the NFL if he ends up being a first read and run quarterback. He just does not have the athletic upside to survive as that type of a player. So I'm not saying that he is a first read and run quarterback at all, only that he did do that a few too many times for my liking at certain points in his tape. So as far as him getting to that second read, surveying the field, it's kind of the same deal where you can find examples of him doing those things on tape, but it comes back to what was he asked to do versus what he can do. You can find examples of him standing tall in the pocket, going through his reads, navigating the rush, but you kind of have to squint a little bit more to find those examples because of what he was really asked to do and allowed to do in that Indiana offense. And it just leaves some general questions about how good his processing is overall, his pocket presence, and what will it all look like in a more complex NFL offense against NFL defenses. Now, the great thing about Mendoza is that if you do share the same concerns as me and think he's got a lot more room still to grow than many out there might suggest with him as a prospect, well, his character and competitive energy is off the charts. And he's the kind of guy that inspires the type of belief you look for to say that he's going to get in the lab. He's going to do whatever is necessary to get better every single day, just as he did in college all the way to a Heisman Trophy and a national championship. And I'm not in the room with the whiteboard with Mendoza, but man, he took the nation by storm with his electric press conferences and the scenes of him with his big smile, uplifting this team with that contagious energy that he brings. And honestly, man, I do buy it. And I think it's a big reason people are so high on him and perhaps willing to overlook some of his weaknesses and just assume he's going to figure it out. But it's not always a guarantee that that happens. And by the way, what happens when you rip him out of that Indiana machine? A team that, by the way, still beat Purdue 56-3 on the day of by far Fernando Mendoza's worst tape. What happens when he almost inevitably gets his teeth knocked in by an NFL defense at some point? And not that he won't get up and keep punching. I almost certainly think he will, but how hard will he punch back? And for how long will he have that same contagious smile that everyone gravitates towards and that convicted confidence that he has right now, surrounded by all of the rainbows and butterflies that have come attached with that Indiana program and their success? I think it's a fair question. Now, up to this point, I've really highlighted that Mendoza is a pocket-oriented thrower who's going to have to win in structure and from the pocket to be a hit in the NFL. I started with that viewpoint for a reason, and I do believe that to be true. However, this isn't Grandpa Phil Rivers out here we're talking about. And I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight his ability to run for first downs and surprise defenses with his legs, because it is a big selling point with Mendoza. He's far from a great overall athlete. He's a tall, rigid, long strider who doesn't change directions well, and he takes a few steps to really get moving. But because of this, teams don't really respect his ability to pick up first downs with his legs, or even to keep the ball on a read option at times too in the design QB run game. But Mendoza is really, really good at recognizing this, making teams pay when they maybe rush too far upfield or open up a lane because they ran a stunt or play man coverage without any sort of a QB spy element. So often it's a QB's willingness to use his legs that can hold him back just as much as maybe a lack of speed and athleticism. I've lost years of my life screaming at my TV for some guys like Ryan Tannehill, a former receiver, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert before this most recent season, screaming at them to use their damn legs as a weapon more often when those opportunities come up. But Mendoza is the opposite. He has an excellent feel for when those lanes open up, and he doesn't hesitate to take off and make defenses pay for it. And he can actually eat up a lot of ground with those long legs once he gets rolling. And as we saw in that legendary touchdown run in the national championship, he's a big dude too. And he can shrug off some tackles and get a little extra yardage out of these runs as well. So this is a heavy plus to Mendoza's game, but I will circle back here to the idea that he's still not a guy who's gonna butter his bread by making plays out of structure in the NFL. If you give him the right opportunity and he's got the space to hurt you, he'll take advantage of it. But like I said, he's not an explosive athlete, and his arm talent and accuracy on the move has its limits. If he gets pressured quickly, he's not going to really get out of trouble very often in the way that so many top NFL QBs can. And when he does get out of the pocket, it's not that there's no room for some creative throws out of structure, but he's much more likely to tuck and run and get what he can, as opposed to detonate a defense with some 40-yard completion rolling left and off his back foot, you know? So this brings me to my final conclusion on Fernando Mendoza. Ultimately, I see a QB who, yes, can pick up some first downs with his legs, but a prospect who's primarily going to need to dominate within the structure of the offense from the pocket if he's going to prove to be worth a first-round pick. Meanwhile, I have, to varying degrees, at least some questions regarding so much of what he's going to need to dominate from the pocket at the next level. This includes accuracy, pocket presence, and his overall processing ability, largely stemming from the simplicity of the offense he was asked to run at Indiana. That said, no college QB is perfect, and so much of finding success at the next level comes down to work ethic and the desire to improve, and Mendoza has shown the type of football character worth betting on. So for those familiar with my grading system, my final grade on Mendoza is a 6.45. For most of you, that means nothing. But this falls into place as a first-round grade for a quarterback, someone I'd be willing to take a chance on inside the top 10 of any given draft, but also someone that would not be the number 1 or even number 2 QB in most classes. For comparison's sake, this is the same grade I had on a collection of guys including Mac Jones and Jaden Daniels, who admittedly I was too low on, and a tick ahead of where I had, say, Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, but kind of in that cluster with those names right there. And then he's also, as well, just a tick below a big crop of much more boom or bust style QBs. high upside guys like Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. And in regards to last year, he would have been comfortably my QB2, a decent tick behind Cam Ward, who obviously went number 1, but also pretty healthily above Shedeur and Tyler Shuck and Jackson Dart for my grades from those guys last year. So that's kind of a little snapshot of where I view him overall. And look, I'm not here to run a full history course of my draft hits and misses or to act like me or anyone out there is close to perfect when it comes to evaluating QBs. But if I'm just being honest about what I see in Mendoza, it's not that he can't work out and be a really good QB. It's more so that I think it's less likely to happen with him than it is with, say, the average QB who goes number 1 overall. So when the Raiders inevitably take him, I won't be slamming them or calling it a bad pick or anything like that. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And if you would take him at number 6 in the draft, but you got the number 1 pick and you need a QB and there's nobody else in this class, well, you might as well take him at 1. But man, if it's the Raiders, they've got some work to do this offseason because, as we described, Mendoza is a guy whose floor is even more dependent on his surrounding cast than the average rookie, who's already very dependent on his surrounding cast. And right now, as of this recording, we don't even know who the Raiders coach is, let alone who on that roster can be his, back shoulder glue guy or pass protect in front of him, especially on the right side of that Raiders line. But with this year's draft class, there is just something so simple about only having one guy at the top to really consider. It's kind of nice to just be real about my thoughts on one guy without having to take my stance on one guy over another, because obviously, it's the pancakes versus waffles debate. You can't like one and like the other with NFL quarterback evaluations. It's kind of nice to just have one guy. But with Mendoza, look, the reality is about 60% of first-round quarterbacks don't work out. And with where I'm at on Mendoza, I think there's about a 50% chance that he doesn't either, that he gets to the end of his rookie contract and he's not a starter in the league. And I obviously wouldn't say that about every quarterback prospect. In my opinion, Mendoza does have a pretty risky profile as far as number 1 overall picks go. And I do think there is a legitimate conversation to be had with the Raiders that they might actually be better off moving down, getting a bounty of picks, and then taking the risk that a higher probability quarterback prospect could be available for them next year, on theoretically as well a better roster within a more stable team timeline. Now, I don't think they do that, knowing how teams operate. So if you're a Raiders fan, you're looking at the other side of that coin. If I think there's a 50% chance that he's a bust effectively, well, I do think he's got enough going on for him that there's about a 30 to 40% chance that he's like a Kirk Cousins meets Bo Nix-esque quality starter in the league. A tier 3 guy, if you will, that maybe doesn't have a crazy ceiling, but someone you can theoretically win with if you build a great team around him. And then if we're painting this kind of probability curve on him, I'd say there's about a 5% chance that Fernando Mendoza is just built different, that he's going to have that gamer mentality, develop into one of the best field general, pocket passing types of quarterbacks in the league today. And that's kind of your best case scenario prayer as a Raiders fan or whoever ends up drafting him. So for the lack of giving a hot take on Mendoza, I do think that this kind of probability curve outlook on QBs is the healthiest way to project QBs into the NFL. And that's kind of where I landed with him. 50% chance he's not very good. 30 to 40% chance he emerges as a very solid quality starter, 5% chance he's dicing dudes up from the pocket and a step ahead of the competition. And then I guess another 5% or so mixed in there for any number of possible outcomes. But that's where I landed at with him. I'm very curious what you guys think. Should the Raiders take Mendoza with the number 1 overall pick, or should they just collect a bounty of picks and let someone else roll the dice on him? It'll be very fascinating to see how things play out with the draft and, more importantly, with Mendoza's career. I really appreciate you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you did. But that's all I got here today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.